Tonight with me I have the producer of this San Francisco stand-up comedy competition, as well as the supreme commander of the Comedy Underground. Please help me welcome Jon Fox. Hi, Jon.
Hi there.
How are you?
Very fine. How about yourself?
Supreme commander, eh?
Yeah, well, it's a kind of a quasi-military organization.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's like the Comedy Foreign Legion.
Are you able to be speaking about that to me, or will you have to kill me?
Well, I don't know exactly. I'm going to have to kill you later, but
Very
we'll just
good.
talk about the comedy competition.
Let's do. Now, I'm sure anyone who's from San Francisco has heard about the San Francisco comedy competition. It's been going on for ages, a long time. Now, when did you get involved in it?
I started in 1977, which was the second year. It had been started in 1976 by a fellow named Frank Kidder, and he'd burned every bridge in town. And I happened to bump into him at a coffee shop in North Beach along with my wife, Ann, and we saw the talent that he was doing in his workshop that night, which included Dana Carvey, and we said, wow. And he said he had this idea for a comedy competition to bring attention to them, and we said, where did we sign? And we ended up going in partners with him and creating a national and an annual event.
Now, personally, is comedy something very special to you in particular? I mean, have you been funny? Are you funny when you were a kid?
You know, like in Good Morning Vietnam, in my heart I know I'm funny, but I don't think people find me very funny. When I started the Punchline, I used to MC it for about 3 weeks, and it was just a frightening experience, and then I ended up installing Bobby Slayton there for a year and a half as the house MC, and that worked out a lot better.
He'd be a very aggressive house MC, I think.
He was. Well, he was banned from every other club in town at that point, so I feel I take a lot of credit for, or if you don't like Bobby, you can hate me, because I think we played a big role in helping him along in his career.
Well, we love Bobby. Bobby, if you're out there. Tell me a little bit about how comedy was back in the day when it first started, the Punchline and that. How is it different then than it is now?
Well, it was a gigantic awakening because we were coming out of this very strident time of the Vietnam War and the social outcry that surrounded that. During that period, only Richard Pryor and George Carlin were getting any attention as comedians. And then all of a sudden it was over and everyone needed to laugh. And this crazy idea came up called a comedy club. And I think the Punchline was the first one in San Francisco and one of the first in the country. And I remember thinking, are there enough comedians to do this? And it turned out there were quite a few people that had been working the streets of San Francisco who had always wanted to try it, and somehow they were getting on stage here and there. And we ended up opening the Punchline in 1978, and Bill Graham bought it a year and a half later and made it into a beautiful place and became quite an institution.
That's pretty amazing. Now, you were saying it stemmed from what you thought, Vietnam War and people being scared, discouraged, maybe?
Well, they were ready for a laugh.
Yeah.
I mean, after all that, they were ready to laugh. And I think, cultural entertainment, different forms of entertainment are cyclical. And I think comedy had been kind of on the sideline there for a while, and it was ready for a big comeback. But it's always been around. I mean, ever since Mark Twain, it's always been an interest in laughing. I always say it's the world's second oldest profession.
Very good. So when comics opened for strippers, it was the first and the second oldest profession at the same time. Pretty good. So going back to when it first started and people were in need of comedy, there was a point at where comedy kind of died out in San Francisco, and clubs started closing, the Improv closed, different, it didn't seem like it was back in the day. It was a little bit different,
well,
less
think,
venues.
Any new idea, whether it's comedy in San Francisco or the internet in Silicon Valley, there's kind of initially there's a whole lot of people trying to get into it, and then it kind of finds its own level. So, there was an overexpansion. And at the time, my wife and I were publishing a national comedy magazine called Just for Laughs, and we were trying to list all there were like 500 clubs across the country.
Yeah.
I think it's now probably down to about 200. So it's pulled back, but it's probably found its proper level. And not only that, but there's a lot of theater shows now that weren't going on at that time. So I think comedy is every bit as popular as it ever was.
Very good. Now, when you've been doing this a long time, and with the comedy competition, you see people coming up through the ranks, and you see somebody. Now, when you see someone, do you say, that's a funny person? Or do you think that's a very well-trained comic that's funny? I mean, do you think that it's something that is intrinsically born in their nature to be funny and really connect with the audience?
It's organic. I don't think it can be taught, and that's one of the great things about it. We don't have to have professors giving us grades.
Nice.
But I think it is very hard to learn. There's certain aspects of it you can learn, certain techniques, but it'll be pretty obvious to the trained eye that you're kind of pretending. You don't really have that essence of comedy if that's your approach. And then someone like a Dana or a Robin comes along and they'll just absolutely blow you away. You know?
That's now Dana. I have a list of all these people: Dane Cook, Dana Carvey, Marsha Warfield, Will Durst, Carlos Rocky from Reno 911, funny guy. Also the little Chihuahua dog for Taco Bell.
So these are alumni of the comedy competition.
These are all different ones.
Well, we
that
have
I found.
Louis C.K., Patton Oswalt. So yes,
Patton
Ellen
Oswalt.
DeGeneres. I didn't, you know.
Excellent. So all these people, when they started, you've seen them come up and then do television. That when you see them again, have they changed tremendously from when you first saw them as a green comedian that's rising up through the levels here?
Well, some of them do get pretty standoffish, and unfortunately, but some of them don't change. And fortunately, I'm able to meet them when they're just starting out. In many cases, they're in their early 20s, and they go through this event, and it's a very it's a grueling event, but they learn a lot about themselves. They meet a lot of other comedians, and I think it ends up generally having a good place in their mind. So when I run into them later on, they're happy to see me. And I usually don't have anything I want to do with them. I don't have any deals I'm trying to pitch to them, so we still get along. Yeah.
But that's the time you should pitch.
I know I should pitch, but I'm not really interested in Hollywood. So I just like the nightclubs. I like the live comedy scene, and I really have no interest in going down and pitching a sitcom.
I see. Okay, well, you'll be the one that isn't.
Yeah.
Out of all the other people.
I try to be different if possible.
I see. So speaking of being different and the material that some people bring to comedy, some can be very explosive, very controversial. Do you see people, do you think they're like that as people, or do they develop that kind of persona to get out there and push their act?
God, generally they're so quiet off stage. You know, they're just kind of, you can't get them to talk. They only want to talk to each other. They certainly don't want to talk to the man. But then they go on stage and they go through this metamorphosis and they're completely different. So it is, yes, they're almost schizoid.
Well, that's another people that I've talked to is that comedians are probably really insecure, a little neurotic or something, and this is a way for them to deal with it because it's a scary, scary thing. I mean, I'm sure being on stage, it's like right with childbirth. It was that scary to me. The two are pretty similar, but it's something you go through it and you come off and you feel really good because you've dared yourself to do that.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you're going into no man's land.
Exactly. It's just you up there.
That's the fantastic thing about it. It's just you, and it's amazing how people disrespect just what a challenge it is to just go up there with no French horn or anything or music to play, just you and that audience, and conquer that situation. That's on a par with any other art form, in my opinion.
Absolutely. So, in all your years of dealing with comedians and comedy, what surprised you? I mean, what did you really not
My inability to predict who would become stars.
Oh, really? So there are some people that you said, that guy's going to make it.
I still don't think Bob Saget should have amounted to anything. You have to have that eye to see it in the live venue and figure out what it's going to be like in front of a camera. And I have to admit, I do not have that ability.
Now, Saget's a really dirty comedian. I mean, he's got a lot of blue material, but he's been on the World's Video, which is kind of like his penance now, because he couldn't do that kind of material.
I guess so.
So, see, you got him back for that. So, what makes a comedian click with the audience? I mean, I'm sure there's more than one thing, but do you see anything that you notice that an audience leans forward and tends to really connect with a performer?
You know, I can't say, if I do, I would sell it and bottle it and sell it and say, here's what you need to do. You just kind of wait for it to happen and just be alert to what the audience is responding to. And I remember when I was in college, I used to work in a clothing store, and the gentleman who owned it would say, we don't buy the clothes that we sell for ourselves. We buy them for the customers. And it's the same with comedy. You want to try and figure out what they want, what they're responding to, and then give it to them. But then you can kind of slip in a few things that you like too in the course of that.
Now, when somebody's talking about their material, you see some people talking about things that their parents do or things that people immediately can connect with. Because, oh yeah, my grandmother doesn't know how to use a cell phone either, or something like that. Do you think that there's a need for an audience to want to see something and recognize something that then they can relax and laugh because the comedian's like them at that point?
Well, it's an easy way for the comedian to establish rapport with the audience, to hit a common topic like that. But in the comedy competition, now you've got this panel of judges sitting back there, and they're looking for something unique, and we're actually telling them grade things unique higher. So you can be getting this audience reaction, and the judge, and you were a judge, so you tell me. But the judge is saying, well, no, I've heard material about being on an airplane or material about going to 7-Eleven. You know, that's just standard fare. I want to see something unique.